Once again, hello everyone, and welcome to Preventing Suspension and Expulsion in Child Care and Development Programs from Policy to Practice training webinar hosted by California Department of Social Services and Child Care and Development Division. My name is Hope Bill. I'm a Staff Services Manager 1 Specialist with the Child Care and Development Division. More specifically, I am part of the Early Childhood Wellness and Inclusion team. This webinar is designed for center-based contractors, for example, general child care and development programs, migrant general child care and development programs, child care and development services, and children with severe disabilities, and family child care home education networks. This webinar is to provide additional policy and technical assistance. I will now pass it on to Cami to go over some housekeeping.
Thank you, Hope. Good morning, everyone. Just a few things before we get started. We have a few housekeeping items about using Zoom for this webinar. As we begin, we request that any AI note-taking tools be turned off per CDS AI guidance and general data security and privacy concerns. When these tools are used, sensitive information shared in our discussion may be stored on external software platforms. Many AI note-taking tools are managed by third-party providers, which might not align with CDSS data protection standards. In addition, the use of AI note-taking tools to record conversations without the consent of all parties may violate California's privacy laws. We will be recording this webinar. We will also be downloading the Zoom chat and Zoom Q&A chat feature. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. It will be enabled so that we will be able to use it to send the CDS team your questions at any time. Please make sure your name on Zoom is appearing and that it is up to date. If you need to add or edit your name on Zoom, please hover your mouse over your name and click the ellipses and then click on rename. Throughout the presentation, the audience will be on mute. However, towards the end of the webinar, we will also have time to take and answer your questions from the audience. At that time, everyone will be able to unmute themselves to ask questions or share comments and concerns. Next, Hope will be taking the presentation over. Next slide, please.
The Child Care Division, the Child Care Development Division has designated the Early Childhood Wellness Inclusion Team in collaboration with department and state partners to lead the Child Care Development Division efforts to implement the provision of WIC Section 10491 and 10491.1, which focus on preventing suspension and expulsion in early childhood settings. Now, today's webinar is part of policy and technical support provided by the Early Childhood Wellness Inclusion Team program. Now, the presenters for today is Dr. Lupe Hyman-Lehman. She is the Deputy Director of the California Department of Social Services, Child Care and Development Division. Jawed Ayaz. He is the Chief Multilingual Learner and Inclusion Section. And once again, my name is Hope Bill, and I'm your facilitator today. And there's Cami Kinshalo. She is also a Staff Services Manager 1 Specialist, and Shakshi Sharma. She is also a Staff Services Manager 1 Specialist. Now we have with us also Child Development Consultants from CCDD Policy Office and Program Quality Improvement Branch, the Department of Education, and the Community Care Licensing Division, here to help us provide additional support in answering questions that you may have. I will turn it back over to Cami to go over our objectives for today.
Thank you, Hope. moving around here. Okay. All right, today's training is to provide guidance, support, and best practices concerning the prevention of suspension and expulsion in childcare and development settings. There are certain steps a program must take before suspension or expulsion can be used or even considered. We will be discussing the following: historical context of AB 2806 and the Welfare and Institutions Code 10491 and 10491.1. Second, prevention first. What must be done before suspension or expulsion can be considered or used? 3, parents' rights, consultations, notice of action, and the appeal process. We'll look at some scenarios. Then we'll do a Q&A session. Then we will look at some referrals and resources to help support implementation. And then we will be closing off the presentation. Next slide, please. I will now pass the presentation to CDSSS Child Care and Development Division Deputy Director Dr. Lupe to start us off by presenting some historical context about prevention of suspension and expulsion.
Thank you, Cami, and good morning, everyone. Very happy to start my day with you all. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of the Child Care and Development Division here at California Department of Social Services. We want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. I think we are growing, right? 450 strong in this webinar, and I believe that we continue to have more join us. So it sounds like we're just very excited to get started, and thank you all. So just a little bit of background. California's AB 2806 was created in response to a high rate of suspension and expulsion in early care and education, and often before children even reach kindergartner. And so the law, which was effective on January 1st of 2024, requires that all CDSS contract programs to provide behavioral supports, and I'll clarify all, meaning Title V, engage in families, ensure due process, and protect children for expulsionary practices. And together we are building safe, inclusive, and supportive environments where every child can thrive. Let's go to our next slide. All right, so for today's webinar, we're not just about compliance with the new requirement, which you all have that shared goal with us too. It's about families and their children. It's about making sure that every child, regardless of background, ability, and life circumstances, they feel safe, supported, and included in the early learning and care systems. So for years, researchers and advocates has raised concerns about how often young children were being suspended or expelled from preschool settings and child development settings, and so many before they even started kindergarten, as referenced. The research shows that preschoolers were being expelled 3 times the rate of a K-12 student, especially boys of color, and children with disabilities were disproportionately affected. So California's leaders took this concern seriously, and that's where we get to the next slide in regards to the Assembly Bill 2806. So of September 2022, it was signed into law and went into effect on January 1st of 2023. And it responded to a pattern where programs were suspending and expelling children too quickly. Parents weren't told in regards to their rights, and children weren't being given the behavior supports that they needed to thrive. So the intent of the AB 2806 was to ensure that suspension and expulsion are truly the last resort. And it requires requirement for the Child Care and Development Program for Children with Disabilities, which is CHON, and the General Child Care and Development Program, CCTR, Migrant Child Care and Development Program, CMIG, and the CCTR and CMIG programs that hold Family Child Care Home Network contracts. So this applies to just those contracts. AB 2806 requires programs to protect vulnerable children from exclusion, develop behavior support plans and interventions before exclusion is considered, ensure that family is engaged, so family engagement is key, mandate clear due process and appeal rights, and eliminate discriminatory or reactive disciplinary practice. Since the law took effect, CCDD has been working closely with the Department of Education, who are here with us too, in the field to turn policies into practice. And for this purpose, CCDD has issued a Child Care Bulletin 23/24, Child Care Bulletin 24/23, and a designated team to lead the implementation of this law. So you're hearing directly from that implementing team that's here to support you. I also want to just share one thing, that although we explained the why, I know that I have been out to many of your sites and have seen extraordinary practices that we are going to pull from. So you may, as you're going through these slides, please reflect that many of this came also from the work that you already are doing. And now, in a sense, we're memorializing this work through this PowerPoint and our technical assistance. So I want to just give you all a big shout out and a thank you for the work that you are doing already, and hope that this will just continue to, in a sense, name what you're doing, as well as pulling from your expertise for this. And then finally, want to just say that as we move forward, our collective commitment is to foster an inclusive and supportive and safe learning environments that we see in all your settings, that helps our children develop and grow and supports our families, which is our all common goal. So with that, I will turn the next slide over to the team to continue.
Hello, everyone. Here are some key terms that you will be hearing throughout our webinar today. WIC section 10491D defines suspension.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't hear you. You sound very far away.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, let me know if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Much
Okay,
better.
thank you. So I'll just start again. So here are some key terms that you will be hearing throughout our webinar today. WIC section 10491D defines suspension as any removal of a child from all or part of the program day, or the prevention of a child from attending the program for 1 or more days in response to the child's behavior. WIC section 10491A defines expulsion as the permanent dismissal of a child from a program in response to the child's behavior. WIC 10491E defines persistent and serious behaviors as either repeated patterns of behavior that significantly interfere with the learning of other children, or interactions with peers and adults that are not responsive to the use of developmentally appropriate guidance. This includes, but is not limited to, physical aggression, property destruction, and self-injury. Some examples of persistent and serious behaviors include continuous physical aggression, such as hitting, biting, or kicking. Another example is continuous punching of walls or throwing objects. Next slide, please. So what is suspension? As mentioned in the previous slide, it is any removal of a child from all or part of the program day, or the prevention of a child from attending the program for 1 or more days in response to the child's behavior. What suspension may look like is having the parent or guardian pick up the child early due to behavior issues. A soft suspension could look like removing the child from their program day and putting them in a timeout, or having them sit in the office because of behavior issues. Next slide. WIC section 10491.1b requires that before suspension or expulsion, programs must document the child's behavior and the strategies, interventions attempted, inform and engage parents, guardians about the behaviors and supports, consult with appropriate community resources, such as inclusion or mental health specialists, to determine if reasonable alternatives exist, provide families with written notice if suspension or expulsion is being considered, including due process and appeal rights. In addition, we highly recommend that prior to determining suspension or expulsion, please reach out to your assigned child development consultant. Please note that programs cannot move directly to suspension or expulsion. They must first work with the family, document the behavior concerns and supports provided, and consult with community resources to ensure all reasonable options have been explored. Only then, if no other option is appropriate, may written notice be given to the parent or guardian, which must also include due process and appeal rights. Next slide. When we document behavior, the goal isn't to build a case against a child or to catch misbehavior. Documentation is to build a case for support and understand and support what the child needs. What we capture in the documentation are when and where the behavior happened, such as routine or activity, what happened before, such as possible triggers, what the behavior might be communicating, its function, how adults responded, such as strategies we've tried, the child's response and next steps, so what worked, what to adjust. So why does this matter? It shows patterns across routines instead of isolated incidents. It keeps the team, so the providers, family, staff, on the same page, creates a clear record of supports tried and helps refine what works, builds accountability and transparency with families, and shifts the focus from punishment to prevention and teaching. When we document this way, we make behavior understandable. Next slide, please. Documentation becomes a roadmap for support and keeping children connected, not excluded. Here's an example of what documenting behavior signaling support may look like, but it may also include the date and time of the event. Next slide, please. So what happens when the program deems the suspension necessary? Programs have an obligation to support the child's return, not to remove them indefinitely. Programs must collaborate with the parent or guardian to discuss the behavior and supports provided. Document incidences and interventions showing that supportive strategies were attempted. Consult with appropriate community resources, such as inclusion specialists, mental health consultants, to confirm no other reasonable options are available. Provide written notice to the parent or guardian that clearly explains the reason for the suspension, the interventions attempted, the duration of suspension, as well as includes the family's due process and appeal rights. And finally, develop a plan of support to help the child successfully return and remain in the program. Next slide, please. Support after suspension. WIC section 10491.1 also requires a written plan of support for the child's return if suspension is used. Programs must support the return of a child to full participation by continuing engagement with parents and community resources, staying connected with the family throughout the suspension period, including community partners such as behavioral specialists or early intervention providers in planning for reentry. They must develop a clear, written support plan that outlines how the program will help the child succeed upon return. This plan should include strategies, accommodations, and follow-up meetings. This also includes providing referrals to services. If additional needs are identified, provide referrals for developmental, mental health, or behavioral support services with the family's consent. If the child has an IFSP or an IEP, contact the responsible agency with the parent or guardian's consent. It's essential to coordinate with the child's service agency, such as regional center or school district, to ensure supports align with their existing plan. Remember to always obtain written consent before sharing information. Next slide, please. Here is an example of what a written support plan may look like to support full return to program. It must be noted that programs are only to use suspension as a last resort and must ensure any suspension is paired with a written plan for support. So what is the importance of a written plan after suspension? A written plan keeps the focus on prevention and support and not punishment. It ensures the child has clear, consistent strategies in place before returning. Families are directly involved, making the plan a collaboration instead of a directive. Plans document both in-program and home-based supports, which increases consistency. Having it in writing creates accountability for staff and helps track progress. Most importantly, it aligns with AB 2806, keeping children included, supported, and ready to succeed. Next slide, please. Here is another example of a written support plan. The essential sections should cover what the program would do, what the parent or guardian at home would do to participate, and what are the next steps. If additional needs are identified, program must provide referrals for developmental, mental health, or behavioral support services with the parent or guardian's consent. Next slide, please. Documentation is not about catching misbehavior. It's about understanding and supporting what the child needs. Here are some tools that can be found at challengingbehavior.org and may help us connect behavior to its function and plan supports. I will now turn it over to Hope, who will discuss expulsion, what it is, and the steps to prevent it. Thank you.
So what is expulsion? It is the permanent dismissal of a child from a program in response to the child's behavior, according to WIC 1049A. Expulsion means permanent removal of a child from a California state-funded child care and development program due to persistent and serious behavior, after all required intervention and supports have been attempted and documented. What expulsion may look like: telling a family that they will need to find another care arrangement center because the child is not a good fit for the program, or that the program can no longer support the toddler or preschooler. So what may a soft expulsion look like? Gradually reducing the child's hours without a clear plan, repeatedly suggesting that the parents seek another program instead of offering support, making participation conditions so difficult that the family feels they have no choice but to leave. Next slide, please. Expulsion could only occur every other expulsion should only occur when every other possible support and intervention has been exhausted. Even then, there are specific responsibilities programs must follow under the Prevention of Suspension and Expulsion law. Now, expulsion can only be considered after all preventive, individualized, and collaborative strategies have been implemented, documented, and proven unsuccessful in maintaining the child's safe participation. Programs must demonstrate that the child's continued enrollment poses an ongoing serious safety threat. Providers must show that they have adjusted the environment or expectations, use trauma-informed and cultural sensitive strategies, held meetings with families, consulted external experts, and attempted behavioral supports and referrals. Now, if the child has an IFSP or an IEP, contact the responsible agency with the parent's consent. And also collaborate with the child's agency to ensure the family continues to receive support, that the exclusion does not disrupt mandated services. Next slide, please. Now, in the case of suspension or expulsion, a notice of action, also known as an NOA, serves as the official notification that the program is taking action to remove the child from the program, either temporarily or permanently. It also protects the family's rights to understand, question, and appeal the decision. Now, when a parent or guardian receives the NOA, and that their child is going to be suspended or expelled from the program, the NOA informs the parent of the following: the specific reason for the suspension or expulsion, the effective date, evidence that the program has taken reasonable steps and supports, such as consultations and referrals and behavior support plans, meeting with the parents, a written statement that suspension and expulsion is the last resort, and a clear instructions for filing an appeal. The key difference between the two is a suspension NOA communicates a temporary action with the possibilities of the child returning. And an expulsion NOA communicates permanent removal from the program. Now, both require parents' rights and appeal information to be provided. But expulsion requires more thorough documentation of the steps taken before reaching that decision. Now, please note, parents need to know that the child cannot be suspended without providing resources and a written plan of action and support. Beginning in July 1, 2023, if a program suspends or expels a child, the program shall issue the child's parent or guardian a written notice of action, with the exception that the effective date of the action may be no less than 24 hours after services of the notice. Next slide, please. Now we will discuss the appeal process. So what is an appeal process? Once the parent or guardian receives the NOA, within 14 calendar days from the effective date of the suspension or expulsion, the parent can file an appeal. And depending on the program type, the parent, legal guardian may report and submit their appeal to Department of Social Services or California Department of Education. They can request translation or assistance to ensure accessibility during the appeal process. Be informed that there is no local fair hearing for suspension or expulsion when an appeal is made. Next slide, please. Now, when an appeal is submitted, the Department of Social Services or the Department of Education will review the appeal. They will issue a final decision and notify the contractor, the program, and the parent or guardian. Please keep in mind, the Department of Social Services or the Department of Education decision regarding their appeal is final. Now I would turn the presentation over to Cami, who will introduce and discuss 3 possible scenarios for us to consider.
Thank you, Hope. Okay, a 3-year-old child with autism spectrum disorder has difficulty following transitions during the program day and cries loudly during cleanup time. The provider suspends the child for 3 days, citing challenging behaviors related to autism. The child returned after 3 days with no adjustment to the program. So let's look what is not in alignment with Welfare and Institutions Code 10491.1. First, the child cannot be suspended for behaviors related to their disability. Second, the provider did not consult with the family and IEP team. Third, the provider did not document strategies and supports already provided related to the child's behavior. 4, the provider did not consult a mental or behavioral health consultant. The provider did not make any adjustments for the child's safe participation to the program or return to care. And finally, there was no written notice with appeal rights no later than 24 hours before it took effect. So basically, the provider did not provide a notice of action before the child was suspended. What should the provider have done that was in alignment with Welfare and Institutions Code 10491.1? First, discuss with the family to understand successful strategies used at home and/or therapy. 2, adjustment to the program such as visual schedules, countdown timer, choice of cleanup tasks, sensory tools, and/or adjustments. Third, consult with child mental health consultation services or specialist. Provide written behavioral support plan and designated staff to implement. Document the progress, triggers, and/or outcome. Only if immediate safety risk remains after exhausting all supports, a time-limited suspension may be used as a last resort with return to care plan and detailing specific adjustment of the program for the child's safe return. The provider consults with the family and IEP or IFSP team if applicable. And finally, the provider documents strategies and supports already provided related to the child's behavior. Next slide, please. Okay, scenario 2. A 5-year-old child frequently engages in yelling and refuses to follow directions during nap time. The center responds by asking the parent to pick up the child early several times a month. So, what is not in alignment with Welfare and Institutions Code 10491.1? First, asking a parent to pick up their child early is considered suspension under the law. Secondly, all due process steps were not followed before a child is suspended from the program, such as documenting the behavior, meeting with family, creating behavioral support plans, or consulting with mental health consultant or specialist. So what should have happened? First, treat early pickup as a suspension. The program should have met with the family to understand sleep patterns, routines, and strategies, possibly adjust nap time or other quiet activities, shorter sleep periods, separate calm area, or new routines. Consult with a specialist if behavior persists. Provide a written behavior support plan and strategies designated to staff to follow. And finally, document the incident's triggers, progress, and outcome, and review with the parent and/or guardian. Next slide, please. Okay, scenario number 3. At the end of September, a 4-year-old child begins showing persistent aggressive behaviors, hitting classmates during free play and throwing blocks. The teacher documents each incident in an incident log and notices the pattern happens multiple times per week. In October, the teacher and site director meet with the child's parents, share the incident logs, and discuss strategies to support the child at home and in the classroom. The behavior continues, and by November, the program brings the child in an early childhood mental health consultant to observe the child for 3 weeks and provide a written behavior plan and recommends positive behavior supports, which the teacher implements. In December, with the parents' written consent, the teacher contacts the school district's special education team for an evaluation. An IEP meeting is held, and the district recommends speech therapy and small group social skills instruction, but services will not start for another 2 months. In February, the child throws a wooden block and strikes another child in the face, requiring medical attention. Later that week, the child pushes a teacher to the floor when being redirected from the playground gate. Next slide, please. The director determines the child's behavior now poses a serious safety threat to the other children and staff. Family referral. The director provides the parents with a list of other early learning programs that can offer a lower staff to child ratio and behavioral support. Transition help. The mental health consultant calls the receiving program to share Alex's behavior plan. Written notice. Parents receive a notice of action receipt of service 48 hours before the expulsion date. The notice explains the safety threat, list of interventions attempted, and outlines the parent's rights to appeal to the California Department of Social Services within 14 days. The child's family appeals, but the state upholds the program's decision, citing documented compliance with all intervention requirements and ongoing serious safety threats despite supports. The child transitions to a preschool program with smaller class sizes and full-time behavioral aides. I will now pass it to Hope to facilitate Q&A.
Okay, if you have any questions that have not been answered in the chat, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
It looks like we have a couple. Deborah?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Quite honestly, I have quite a few questions, but I imagine if we take a few at a time. But I'm going to start off with the scenario that we just went over, scenario 3. I thought it was interesting when we talked about, or when you talked about the safety issue. Family daycare providers don't have the privilege to be able to move a child to another classroom or have a lot of private sections in their home to change the environment. Example, you said the child through the block. The program director offered to the parent, here's another school that has smaller staffing, or excuse me, smaller staffing, but the ratio for two providers or for the school. I guess what I'm saying is that family daycare providers don't have that same privilege to be able to say, you know what, we have extra staff and this child can go to that particular school or to another school. This is a place where family daycare providers do not belong in suspension and expulsion. It has been spoke out widely, and I don't understand why the state feels it was important to put family daycare providers in this particular space to pick and choose. They don't pay us what we deserve, but yet they want to put us in the same class as sinners. We do not belong here. I'm trying to figure out who will decide that the steps that the provider has taken are acceptable steps. Who makes that decision? And I'm going to let someone else speak.
Do we have someone from the back to address that?
I can speak. This is Anna. Do you hear me? I can't tell when I'm on camera. I mean, this is, your question is why were effectively family childcare providers included in the legislation? That I think that's a question for the legislators. The question for the on how do you deal with moving a child when you don't have other classrooms is a question for the agency, the fetch-in agency. This only applies to family child care providers who participate in fetch-ins, and they would work with the agency, and the agency could find an alternative placement. That's part of the process.
Do you think that when the legislatures would have brought this up to the state, that the state would have stepped in and said, you know what, this is not a place for family daycare providers who are in the fetching programs. You're right, this is for fetching programs, but we are smart enough and intelligent enough to know it's going to bleed over to every providers. But again, the state had that opportunity to legislatures and say, you know what? We need to discuss this more. We need data because there's no data on this. Family daycare providers in the fetching program and providers in general do not belong in this space because there's no data. The state relies on data, but in this space right here, the state said, we don't need it. And that's not fair to family daycare providers who provide a service to the state as essential workers that keeps this state on its feet to be the fourth largest economy in the world, to be set to the side when decisions like this is made is not fair. I'm sorry, but I wanted to be in this webinar because this is a very unfair place for providers. And if it was a decision that legislatures were made, then this was the state's opportunity to stand up to legislatures for providers and say, we need data on this. This should be pulled back, set to the side, and say, you know what? We need data. In order for this to be truly successful, in order for this to be truly fair, in order for this to be truly equitable, it has to be set to the side and data has to be received. This is not fair. Family daycare providers do not function on the same level as centers, but this space, the state wants family daycare providers to be on the same level. We are not there. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you for your-
feedback.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. We have another question.
And next is Patrice. You should be able to speak now.
All right, thank you very much. And Ms. Deborah, I liked how you put your program together and speaking up for the family daycares. However, I'm a center base, and my question is, I'm understanding from these scenarios you gave that the parents' rights and that we cannot expel. But what happens when the parent is asking us when they come in that they know it's going to be a difficult day and asking us to call if the child is having a difficult time? So I was kind of in a crunch. I didn't call, but it was her request. Do I follow it for due to her parents' rights? What do I do in that type of scenario?
Dakshi or Jawed or Anna?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay. So I was just curious of if it happens to me again, how I should support the parent as well as the center. And if the parent is requesting us to give a call due to difficulty of their child, what do we do then?
I think that's a question we're going to have to take down and get back to you on.
Okay.
I
That's-
agree, Hope. Thank you, Patrice, for the question. So if you could, so obviously we will take your question today and we will reach out to you, and possibly if you can reach out to your assigned consultant, or also if you can reach out to us in our inbox, definitely we will look forward to provide you resources and guidance, and as well as any strategy that could support you and the child and the parent too.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will add our email address in the chat. Thank you.
Next, we have Marie.
Hi, yeah, my question is short. It's just we are a private preschool. We have both cash pay parents and families who are covered by the county tuition subsidy programs like RCOE and CalWORKS. I'm wondering, do these laws and guidelines apply to us, to all the children, to just the subsidized families, or not at all since we're a private preschool?
It only applies to state programs, not private pay.
It very specifically, this is Anna again, it applies to programs that participate in a direct contract, and one of the direct contracts listed in it. So it's the state preschool program, the CCTR program, our general child care and development program, those direct contracted programs.
How would I find out if our subsidy programs are connected or are working with those programs?
If it's a voucher-based program, if you're just getting a voucher from a parent, that's not one of these programs.
No, it's a direct, like the programs send us a check directly. So RCOE is Riverside County Office of Education. They send us tuition checks to cover the children who are in their program. And then CalWORKS is a state cash aid program, and they also do the same. They send us checks for the children's tuition, but they're on our end, they are only addressing tuition.
Right. Those are what sorry, and there's a terminology, that's what we call voucher-based programs. Those are where the reimbursement is paid to you directly. But if you're not completing, like CalWORKS, for example, is definitely a voucher-based program. If you're not participating in providing an educational component and completing, parent surveys and using the developmental profile, like those tools to meet the direct contract objectives. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to the consultant and figure out what programs you're participating in.
So I don't know if we have a consultant.
It does not sound like you are a direct contracted program.
Okay, so while they're great advice, we're not directly required to follow all of these or any of this program?
You got it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Jennifer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I have a similar question that kind of goes off back to the previous person. If when we give courtesy calls, usually we'll be at like nap time, give a courtesy call and let a family member know how the behavior is going on, especially if the enrolling parent isn't the one picking up. So that way we just go over some of the things that we're working on in the day. If that parent then suggests or says that she'll have somebody come pick her child up early, we haven't suggested it. We were just calling, letting them know what we're working on today. Is that something that's considered suspension, something that we just document, say that the parent said that she was going to have somebody pick up early? How does that work with this? Does that make sense?
Thank you, Jennifer. This is Joey, and thanks for the question. If I understand your question, if parent calls and requests an early pickup, if it's counted as suspension, right? Is that the question?
So if we are calling and just letting them know how their behaviors are throughout the day, and then the parent says, "Oh, I'll have grandma come pick them up." We haven't suggested it, but they have said it. How does that fall in line with this?
That's a tricky question, I have to admit. And so if that insist is from the programs that ask the parent to pick up the child, definitely it's a suspension. Any early pickup, that's the intention of the program to mitigate the risk. With that approach, that will be counted as suspension. However, if you are just giving a courtesy call to the parent and parent request that they will pick up, so this is something I have to take this question and we have to review it and provide you further guidance. And I do appreciate this is really good question, and we might need to have it in our frequently asked question, which will be
Okay.
on our webpage. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Jennifer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carly, is there any
Trying
any
to
other?
the next hand up because it does look like we have several up, but it's not showing me in order. Okay. Next up, I believe it was Saul.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. So I just want to piggyback on Deborah's comment regarding the situation on this. Regarding data, what during this legislation, as Anne stated, it was done. Why didn't the state did not provide any information regarding this? Because we keep hearing the confusion with networks for childcare providers and centers. We also have to keep in mind that networks are also childcare providers. So they do have their homes, their networks. So there cannot be a comparison of Title 22 and Title 5, in which both providers who basically care for children as well as cash as networks as well be on the same line. So my question is, where was the information and the data provided to them in the first place? Because we understand that any decision that is made from the state legislator, the CDSS is always providing data information to back up those informations. So if we can get more information on detail on this sudden change, because it makes no sense that we have to basically, network providers have to basically comply to centers regulations where both are different structures of identities and at the same time different regulations. So it makes no sense if we can get a clarity for providers who are on the network as well, who have their homes as well as we are, but we're the same, we're not networks, but they're also on the same as we are. Why are those regulations being input for them? What makes it different between a network and a childcare provider? Because if we're saying that we are Title V, then that should make an exception, but we are not Title V. We need to have a clarity on those ones, because now we're making a difference between childcare providers and networks. But if we look into it in details, we're both under Title 22, not Title 25, Title 5. So if we can get a clear information on how was this determined and how was this input, because it makes no sense. Like Deborah said, nothing is making sense that you're trying to pull us all in together in the same pot, which we are not. We're both different identities and different works ethics when it comes to regulations and our professions as well. So we can get please more information and clarity on this data, on how did it came up to, because it makes no sense. I feel like there's still more questions that need to be answered, that we're not getting more input, but we need more clarity on this, on Title 5 and Title 22. Thank you.
Thank you for your
I
comment.
can provide a little clarity. The law, just in terms of data, there was a policy that was felt to be important by the authors of this bill that was to stand up for children and for vulnerable children and the rights of children. It was based on national data. In terms of data and clarity on Title 22 and Title 5, there are currently fewer than 2,000 family child care providers statewide, about 1,900, who participate in affection. This law would apply to those providers. That is the distinction. For providers who are Title 22 and are not among the little slightly less than 2,000 who participate in affection, this does not apply. We can turn to the next question, but thank you for the feedback.
Okay, next up we have Dodie or Dottie. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
It's Dodie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have a couple little questions or suggestions. You guys went through a few scenarios, and in the scenarios you showed what wasn't done. It'd be great if you guys could put out a really detailed list of how we can support our families better, and how, when I'm talking to my staff saying, what have we done? We talk about what we do, but getting that better in writing and that process a little better, maybe a support list. You had a lot of saying what was wrong, but little bit helping us lead the way on how to make that look right and how we should make it look right. And I wanted some clarity on soft suspensions. You kind of included timeout or being removed from a situation and I wanted clarity because my understanding is, if the child needed a safe place to calm down, but no more than 30 minutes. But you call that a soft suspension maybe, and I'm not sure. To do that, we have to go through the whole suspension process.
Let me take this question. Thank you so much, Dodi. This is Joey. I believe you have two questions. One, the soft suspension, and also second, resources for the programs or strategies that will help them to how to support the children and their families. So the good news for the first question. So the resources, this webinar is specifically for outlining the requirements of Assembly Bill 2806 or WIC section 10491 and 10491.1 to just explain the requirements to the applicable contractors. However, when it comes to strategies or resources, so we will have a more detailed and a specific approach to this in November, and that's another webinar titled Nurturing Behavior Through Support. And I'm confident that the content that we have in that webinar will support the programs to pick a specific or great strategies on supporting the children and using the suspension and expulsion as a last resort. So looking forward to you joining that webinar, and very soon we will send it out to our contractors. About your second question, soft suspension, that's correct. So for the CDSS programs, any timeout or any excluding the child from the specific space that the rest of children are there for the purpose of mitigating something that could impact the child's development, including that having the child in a separate room, or taking it to the director's office, or taking it to another office. So these are all counted as a soft suspension or suspension for the CDSS subsidy programs. However, we do have consultants from CDE, which our policy with CSSP, with CDE on the suspension expulsion is slightly different in this area. And I can have them to answer the question if that's allowed in the CSPP program. But to your question for CDSS, CCTR, CEMIC, and CHON and FETCHN programs, any timeout and for the will be counted as a suspension, and specifically the term that we are using, soft suspension.
So it would need a full documentation. Well, we document anyhow, but it sounds like that would be a process that would be an NOA, a notice of action.
That's correct, Judy. So when it comes to suspension, regardless if child will be sent to their home or may parent ask to pick up early, or excluding the child from the learning environment and having the child to be in a separate room. So this will be counted as suspension, and the program will be required to follow the issuing the NOA, documenting the whole event, and giving the notice to the parent.
Even for we're not talking removing them for the whole class. We're talking removing from a situation that where maybe it's better for them for a calm down. It's a 10-minute thing, and then we're replacing, putting them back in that classroom. That would be considered a suspension.
That's correct. So it will be counted as suspension, and it's the requirement of Assembly Bill 2806, that's specifically the weak section 10491.1. So any removal of the child, or temporarily for a minute or 5 minutes or timeout.
Okay.
So it will be counted. Yeah.
I was just referring kind of back to one of the management bulletins. I think there was a time frame on that was less than a half an hour, because
that's correct. So I do have to admit, so there is a slight difference policy between CDS's subsidy programs and CSSP, which is managed by or administered by CDE. So that's why we do have to consult from CDE.
Okay.
And if you prefer, we can have them to reach you back with further guidance or clarification.
No, I mean, yes, at some point, don't have to in this if you're going to give us some better resources. I was just kind of piggyback real quick. A lot of people are talking about the fetch-in and stuff. I will say, we're a small center and we're not attached to a school. To provide the services like this with the staff they have is difficult with the limited resources and not being attached to a school with resources that are just next door that can show up to help us.
Received the feedback. I understand your concern, and it's completely understandable. And we do have some resources, and I hope that you find that helpful. And one of them is the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Network. And if you need any further information about that, feel free to reach out to a assigned consultant. Definitely, they can connect you with further resources.
Okay, thank you. And there's some resources that were added to the webinar chat too. So
that's correct. We do have a couple more slides about these resources too that will help the programs. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Deborah, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I actually have some questions, and thank you for allowing me to speak again. So the young gentleman just spoke about some resources. So that's one of my questions. I have like 3 questions, because my question was, who is providing mental or behavioral health consultants to family child care providers? Where are we supposed to get this list from? And attached to that, if we give this information to a parent and the parent is unhappy with the behavior consultant and feels that they want to file a lawsuit against that behavioral consultant, is that provider also included and subject to being a part of that lawsuit? And will the state help defend that provider? Then the other question goes with the expelling. It was mentioned that there is a transition support. Can you please tell providers exactly what is this transition support looks like? The next question is, who is to provide the approval process that when a provider has a written plan, who approves that written plan for the provider? Because if the provider creates a written plan and the network doesn't accept it, then what? Is there someone there to help the provider write this written plan? And lastly, the appeals. When a child is being suspended or expelled from a center or network, again, the word providers don't use, there is the appeal process. Can the child still attend the program while the parent is going through the appeals process? Thank you.
Deborah, is it possible for you to put your questions in the chat? There was quite a few of them, so we can address them later.
Are there some that you guys can address now for providers can hear them? I'm not as great as honestly in the chat. That's why I like to raise my hand and say it verbally so that everyone can hear it clearly.
Appreciate, Deborah. This is Joey again, and I appreciate the compliment actually. So I will do my best to address most some questions that I remember from you. So one, I will start from the last one, of course. So the appeal process. So we will be issuing further guidance on the appeal process and as well as the notice of action that contractors will issue to the parent. So with that, for now, I can say the child during the suspension period. So when the program issues a NOAA or notice of action to the parent, and it specifically says the child is suspended from this time date to this date. So if parent requests an appeal, so child can return back to care after that period is ended. With a bit difference with the other appeal processes that we have for other reasons, that when the parent requests an appeal, child can return to care. However, given that this situation will be associated to the child's behavior, so to mitigate that risk, so the program will allow the child to return to care after the specific date or the period of suspension is met. For example, if child is suspended for 3 days, parent requests the appeal in the second day, the appeal process will continue as is, but on the third day, once it's done, so child can return care to the program.
What if they're being expelled though? And they're appealing and to being expelled? Can they still attend while the parent is appealing the when the child is trying to be expelled or being expelled?
That's a great point, Deborah. So for expulsion, based on the based on the AB 2806 or WIC section 10491.1, so since it's associated to the child's behavior, when child is expelled and parent requests an appeal, child cannot return to care until the appeal is processed and the decision is made by the state that child should return to care or reinstated. That's the time the child can go back to care. For the suspension, for the expulsion, they can't return to care. And about the resources for family child care home providers, so the Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Network, that's open for all sort of type of providers, for contract, for centers, for FCCH, and even licensed exempt family child care home, but family, friends, and neighbors. So they can reach out to them. Definitely, you can find, or the providers can find more further information on our website, and as well as our lead office or Learning Equity Advancement and Development office. They do have a specific page, quality initiatives. They have listed all resources that can support the providers and contractors. And that was a couple of questions that I can recall. If I missed any other question, Deborah, sorry about that. If you can.
No, great. But I'm glad you hit on that question. On the last one you mentioned, but what if the parent is unhappy with the results from that consultant and they decide that to file a lawsuit against that behavioral consultant, that institution? Can the provider be pulled? I mean, is it likely, or it is likely, that the provider will be named in that lawsuit? Does that leave us open and vulnerable?
Deborah, I appreciate it. This is actually the other question that you have. So about the plan or the behavior plan, how providers could develop that. So for that, providers, specifically family child care home providers, they have to work with their contractors, with their program, to develop such a plan. So for that reason, I could confidently say that so the provider won't be alone developing that plan, and they have to work with the assigned caseworker for that family, or if the program has a consultant or mental health consultant, they have to reach out to them and collaboratively develop the behavioral plan. So about the possible of like or potentially that expose providers to any lawsuit or any other further legal challenges, that's something we can discuss further in details. And I would really appreciate if you can bring such a scenarios in written and send it to our inbox, or reach out to consultants so we can take that and provide further guidance to you and other contract or providers that may have this concept.
Okay, I'll let someone else speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Maria? Maria Cruz? I'm asking to unmute, but I'm not.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misclicked. No question.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the next. Let's see. James?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you for this webinar. It's actually very informative. So I have a couple questions. And this maybe was kind of answered, but so you go through in that scenario 3 that you gave with the child that the program looked like they went through all the required steps, and still the child was hurting, either themselves or others or the teachers. So you issue the NOA. Does if the parent wants to appeal, they have 14 days to do it. Is that correct?
That's correct, James.
Now, what if it goes past the 14 days and they don't appeal it? What happens at that point? Can they still come back like 30 days later and appeal it?
So for suspension and expulsion, specifically, it's listed 14 days. So, and I believe, so obviously we will be issuing for the guidance once we issue the notes, once we distribute the notes of action to contractors, which also attached with the appeal form that's specifically developed for the suspension and expulsion. However, to your question, can they appeal after 14 days? No, at this time. So that we want to make sure that contractors communicate this with parent when they issue the notes of action, specifically to mention that where to appeal, because this is a bit different. The appeal process for suspension and expulsion or related to AB 2006 is a bit different than the other appeal process that we have. Usually it goes through the local fair hearing, and then if it's not resolved, it will come to a state. But for suspension and expulsion, NOAA, when the parent appeal directly, it comes to the, should be submitted to a state. And for that reason, in addition to notes of action, we will be distributing parent pamphlet, which outlines all the steps on what parent can take to request an appeal, or where to submit, or how they can submit, and further information about the suspension or expulsion. And the whole language on that flyer or prompt pamphlet will be parent friendly, so and easy to understand.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, James.
Okay, I'm sorry we're running out of time, so that's going to be our last question. And please, if you look in the chat, there is a link to put additional questions if you have them, and the department will address them. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to share some resources with us. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So based on all the questions, I just want to reassure you that there are tons of resources to help with implementation of this. law, I really want to highlight California Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. The link has been provided in the chat. That is a great resource, and it's actually underutilized. So, if you have a child in your care that is needing some extra support, I would definitely recommend going to California Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. Bright Life Kids is a virtual mental health care resource for children and teens. And then, of course, First Five California. And then regional centers. To find out what regional center is in your area, the link has been provided. All these resources will help you support children in your care and help with implementation of AB 2806. Additionally, next slide, please. Additionally, we have our unit, Preventing Childcare Expulsion California, California Map to Inclusion and Belonging, the California Teaching Pyramid, and the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. Again, also contacting your assigned consultant when you really are feeling like there's too much going on and you don't want to be, not complying with this new law. Next, I will turn it over to Hope to close us out.
Okay, so on the screen is our contact information to the Department of Social Services, and the email there is, once again, if you have any additional questions for us, any comments, we'll be glad to take those and look at them and get back to the appropriate party and to make sure that everyone has access to the answers to those questions. The next slide, please. And once again, we are encouraging everyone to join our listserv. And here's the QR code, and you can scan it on your device and take part in upcoming webinars. Next slide. I'm going to turn it back over to Cami to give us a little snippet on an upcoming webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Hope. So coming up on November 3rd, we do have a webinar specifically designed to support programs in how they can implement strategies there to support prevention of suspension and expulsion. We'll go into a little bit of teaching pyramid, seeing the child through a trauma-informed lens, and just really the next webinar coming November 3rd is really to support programs in helping understand children's behavior as a form of communication so that this law doesn't seem overwhelming and too much to implement. There are, proactive strategies that can be put in place so that can support you and children in your care. And again, that's coming up November 3rd. It'll be a webinar much in the format of this one. And thank you. I will pass it back over to Hope.
That concludes our webinar today, but I really want to take the time to thank each of you for participating in our training today. Now, the main points that we want to leave you with are that suspension and expulsion are last resorts. Family engagement and comprehension support plans are essential to maintaining a child's placement in the educational setting. Documentation is critical to protect both the child and the provider. Referrals to support services are also part of compliance. And finally, the NOA for suspension and expulsion and appeal rights are not optional. A provider must issue a NOA for suspending or expelling a child, and all suspension and expulsions related to behavior are appealable. Please reach out if you have any further or additional questions. Thank you once again for joining us on this webinar, and have a fantastic day.